back in Arizona after having competed at IRONMAN Boulder this past weekend, and this time around I decided to, instead of doing a written race report, I thought it would be more interesting to get a little more insight, a few images from the day before the race as well, and how did I prepare for an Ironman which was raced at 1700 meters high, so 5,600 feet high.
So Boulder was in altitude, so that poses a challenge for the athletes, mostly because of the lack of oxygen. Is that right?
Correct. So obviously we lived in Scottsdale, Arizona now, and Scottsdale is a little over sea level, pretty close to sea level, and the oxygen and altitude, it's a little more deficient, or the air carries less oxygen, and so you kind of have to acclimate for a race like that.
So in a perfect world, so you need to go to altitude to acclimate?
Correct. So the human body kind of adapts to the lack of altitude, so the lack of oxygen. But to do so, it would take between 2 to 4 weeks. So ideally, an athlete that wants to race races like Boulder, either the full or the 7.3, would go to a similar situation as high as Boulder, or such as Flagstaff or even Boulder, and be there training and getting the body acclimated to that deficiency in oxygen for at least, as I said, between 2 and 4 weeks. Not being able to go to altitude, just to multiple reasons, I decided to use a local center called Cyrillene in Scottsdale, Arizona. And Cyrillene does not have an altitude chamber, but it does have a pod where you get inside the pod and you spend some time inside the pod, and inside the pod they simulate both pressure and that lack of oxygen that you experience when you go to high altitudes in the mountains. I was doing the Cyrillene 3 times a week for an hour on the 5 weeks leading up to IRONMAN Boulder, and I was kind of hoping that it would be enough to get my body used to suffering with less oxygen. I've been to altitude multiple times, mostly for training camps, and I usually feel that for the first 3-4 days I feel terrible just training, and this was kind of what I felt when I got to Boulder on the first few days that I got to Boulder. So I definitely felt like although Cyrillene bridged the gap between sea level and the altitude of race day in IRONMAN Boulder, it didn't completely provide the acclimatization that I needed.
So other than Cyrillene, did you adjust your training in any other way to try to consider altitude in Boulder, or just prepare for an Ironman as usual?
When you go to altitude, you must allow your body to try to adapt to altitude. I was doing the adaptation through Cyrillene, so I was actually training at sea level. So I did not dial down any training on the first week that I started doing the treatment at Cyrillene. But obviously, because I was trying to recover from Ironman Texas, which was only 1 month before IRONMAN Boulder, the training was, for the first 2 weeks, was naturally just mostly recovery. And then as I got closer to race day in IRONMAN Boulder, I pretty much just did the normal training that I would do for an Ironman, even though I was trying to adapt to altitude.
So how early did you flew to Boulder before the race? How many days ahead of time?
We got to Boulder Thursday before the race, so that was 4 days before the race day. I did a little training just to try to see how I felt, and obviously just part of the plan as a normal taper week for an Ironman.
How did you feel during those days? Were you did you felt any effect of the altitude?
Yeah, well,
to start with, or were just
just to start off right off the gate, I went for a swim, and I think that's where I would feel the most, because when you swim, you pretty much try to maximize your intake of oxygen when you rotate your head, and I definitely felt like there was not enough oxygen in the air. And so I didn't feel great, but I was kind of blaming the travel, getting to Boulder from Denver, all that. It's always very stressful, so I didn't freak out, but I never felt really good when I got to Boulder.
So we have the days before the race. What about the day, just the day before the race? What do you do? What do you eat? How do you prepare for race day?
So the day before the race, you don't do much. You basically have to try to enforce your carb loading protocol. I have a carb loading protocol that includes breakfast made of pancakes or waffles, and then obviously a little more carbs on those next meals. So lunch is also, I did pasta just because it's better than pizza or any other option as a high carb option. I try to reduce fat and protein to the minimal, and obviously fiber as well, because on the day before you basically just want the carbs and the fluids, so your glycogen reserves are topped up. On the day before, I also have to do a bike check-in, and before the bike check-in I always go for a ride just to see if the bike was okay, and then get back to the house, eat a little more, go check in the bags and the bike, and just relax the rest of the day. Not much going on the day before.
Race day, how did you feel? How did the race unfold? How did you feel? How did it went?
Race morning was a little stressful because the bike was checked in on the day before, the bags were checked in on the day before, so I got the race morning and I pretty much only gave myself about 60 minutes to get ready for the race, because I don't have to do much on race morning since everything is already there, so I only have to set up nutrition. But I got to my bike and the Di2 didn't work. I think maybe the extreme cold, that we had a really cold night that night before the race, so the extreme cold made me drain the battery, and my Di2 didn't even have a light. It didn't work at all, completely dead.
Everyone knows how much you like the cold. What do you call extreme cold for you? Is that what?
Yeah, for
40
me,
degrees Fahrenheit?
For me, extreme cold is under 50 Fahrenheit. So it was 48 in the race morning, which is Fahrenheit, which is 7 degrees Celsius. So it was cold. For me. So race morning I got no Di2. Somehow a few friends of mine fixed the situation, and I actually got to get Di2 for the race, or the battery kind of refilled for the race. But right off the gate, even when I got into the water for the first warm-up before the race start, I felt like I was at high altitude. I was just not acclimated, and it really felt like I was having a small asthma attack throughout the entire swim. So, not great.
But you did come out of the water in the second.
Right, so I don't think the swim really compromised the race. I didn't swim with the very first swimmers, but I felt like I swam with the main contenders. That was where I had planned to come out anyways. And obviously it didn't compromise, but again, once I got on the bike, I felt like I did not have the power that I was supposed to. So perceived effort was way higher than the power and the heart rate. And I tried to dial down and just don't think too much about it, and just focus on my own numbers and do what I can with what I had. But there was never a point on the first half of the race where I felt like, okay, I'm good. No, it was a struggle from the beginning, but I just held down and looked down and keep moving forward. That's what you do on Ironman day.
So I am assuming the run wasn't any easier than the rest of the...
No, so obviously Ironman is a bunch of, there's a lot of ups and downs. you just have to struggle through the lows on that moment. It's a 8-hour race, so you do have many moments of you just want to quit and curl into the fetal position on the side of the road, but you just keep moving forward, and I always give myself a chance to run. It doesn't matter how the swim and bike went, so I always get to T2 and make a decision of actually starting the run, and that's what I did. The swim didn't compromise, the bike didn't feel great, but it's a race of patience, and you have to be relentless and just keep moving forward, one step in front of the other, and just try to run. The run did not feel any easier. I think from all the three sports, I think the swim was where I felt the most the altitude, and then the run was probably the second. The bike, it was just a matter of power being low and heart rate being low compared to perceived effort. But the run felt very tough. I did try to be conservative getting out of transition, because there's that myth that you have a certain amount of oxygen to spend throughout each day. So I was trying to conserve the oxygen I was actually moving through my body, and just try to stay in the game. But obviously it never felt easier. So the feeling of being limited throughout the day was always there.
So overall, you finished 8th. How did you felt about that result? Obviously, professional athletes always go for the win, but even though it wasn't a win, what was your feeling about the race and your overall evaluation? Okay,
well, it's another top 10 at Ironman Circuit. Obviously, the sport is evolving. Everyone's getting faster and faster. So we can only celebrate the top 8 finish. No one trains to be second, so obviously not exactly the dream race, but considering I don't feel like it was my physical ability that was a big limiter on the race day. It was just more the environment that did make a big difference on how the race unfolded. If you look at the top 8, like 90% of the athletes live in Boulder, so obviously they're very acclimatized to the race situation. But I can't be unhappy. It's still a top 8 finish, and we just move forward and stay confident that the next race will be better.
What recommendations would you give to athletes that are going to race in altitude? What can I do? What's the best approach for races above sea level?
I think I would strongly advise for people that want to race at high altitude to go to the race location at least a minimum of 2 weeks in advance. I think full adaptation happens again after 4 weeks. But not everyone can go 4 weeks into a high altitude situation, so try to do as much of your training leading up to the race at a high altitude, and just try to experience going through those motions of getting your body used to the lack of oxygen. So I would both recommend my athletes and any athlete to just go as early as possible, or go to a similar situation as early as possible leading up to the race. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was insightful enough. If you have any questions on comments, just leave it below the video. I'll get back to you as soon as possible and catch you up on the road sometime soon.
Sometimes you need to go and take a step back to see the truth.